The big guy, Jerry Weintraub, didn't want me for this. He wouldn't even consider me for a reading.
Before his death, Pat Morita, the man who gave life to Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, finally broke his silence. For decades, fans believed the story began and ended with crane kicks, wax on, wax off, and timeless wisdom. But behind the cameras was a different tale, one of rejection, battles with Hollywood power players, and a fight that nearly cost him the role forever. What Morita revealed at the end of his life changed how the world sees the movie, and him forever. When people think of the Karate Kid, the first image that appears is that of Mr. Miyagi, the gentle handyman with the wise gaze, clipped words, and a quiet strength that carried Daniel LaRusso through his darkest hours. But what most fans never realized was that Morita almost never had the chance to become Miyagi. He was known in Hollywood primarily as a comedian, someone remembered for one-liners, for stand-up sets, and for light-hearted roles on television. To producers, that background made him the last person they believed could play a war-hardened, emotionally scarred mentor. At the center of the resistance was producer Jerry Weintraub, a powerful figure in the industry. Whenever Morita's name surfaced in casting sessions, Weintraub immediately dismissed it. He didn't want a comic anywhere near the role. He wanted weight, gravitas, someone who looked and sounded like they carried years of sorrow. And so for weeks, Morita wasn't even allowed to audition. His name was rejected over and over again. But fate had other plans. By the early 1980s, Pat Morita's career was drifting into dangerous waters. He had tasted fame before, stealing scenes on sitcoms like Happy Days, but the spotlight that once embraced him was starting to fade. Roles slowed down, offers dried up, and before long, the phone simply stopped ringing. Morita, a man who had once been recognized on television screens across America, suddenly found himself scrambling just to piece together a living. In Hawaii, he tried anything to stay afloat. He hosted small charity fundraisers, wrote copy for local commercials, and performed comedy routines in nightclubs where the lights were dim and the applause modest. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Still, every time he walked off stage or signed off on another ad script, he felt the sting of how far he'd fallen. To the outside world, it looked like his career was slipping away. To Morita himself, it felt like he was treading water, waiting for something unseen, something that might never arrive. During this uncertain stretch, Morita made what seemed like a small personal decision, though it would later shape his destiny. For the first time in his life, he grew a beard, not for a role, not to impress producers, simply because he wanted to. He would later laugh about how much he resembled a hippie, but at the time, he didn't care. He wasn't chasing casting directors anymore. What he couldn't see then was that the beard changed him. It gave him the look of a man who had weathered storms, a man with stories etched into his face. It made him appear older, wiser, more grounded, qualities that would soon prove invaluable. Then came a twist of fate straight out of a Hollywood script. One afternoon in Los Angeles, Morita stopped by his agent's office, prepared to walk away from it all. He was ready to let his contract expire and return to Hawaii for good. But just as he stepped out the door, a secretary came running, calling his name. His agent leaned out and waved him back inside. "Pat, get your butt in here," he said with a grin. "There's a script I think is perfect for you." The script was for The Karate Kid. Morita later said it felt surreal, like destiny itself had intervened. One moment he was walking away from Hollywood, convinced nothing was waiting for him. The next he was holding a script that would change his life. When Morita finally got the chance to audition, he expected the usual Hollywood setup. Producers behind a desk, assistants scribbling notes, maybe even a writer watching quietly from the corner. Instead, he walked into an empty room with one man, director John Avildsen, already famous for making Rocky. But Avildsen wasn't seated casually with a clipboard. He had a camera strapped to his shoulder, the heavy battery pack across his torso. From the moment Morita stepped inside, he was being filmed. "Tell me a little about yourself," Avildsen said from behind the lens. And Morita didn't act. He simply spoke. He shared stories from his life, his struggles, his career. Avildsen kept filming. Then Morita picked up the script. He didn't play it safe. He leaned into the emotional weight, improvising Miyagi's lines with all the depth he could find. When he finished, he expected a polite thank you and dismissal. Instead, Avildsen asked, "Pat, don't you want to take your script with you? You might need it." That small sentence electrified Morita. For the first time, he felt he had truly broken through. Avildsen believed in him. So much so that during heated meetings with the producers, he would simply replay Morita's taped audition. At one point, when Weintraub stubbornly dismissed him again, Avildsen clicked on the monitor and played the footage. The room fell silent. Weintraub leaned forward and said, "Hey, wait a minute. That looks like Miyagi." To which Avildsen replied, "That's the Pat Morita you refused to even let audition." The wall of doubt was starting to crack, but it wasn't over. Most actors only needed one good audition. Morita had to do 5. The producers tested him again and again. Could he recreate the same power? Could he do it in costume? Could he hold his own next to Ralph Macchio, the young actor chosen to play Daniel LaRusso? During the 3rd test, Macchio flew in from New York. The two read scenes together, and their chemistry was immediate. Ralph leaned into Morita naturally, as if he were a real mentor. By the 4th test, Morita was in costume. Ralph later said the transformation was startling, as though Morita ceased to exist and Miyagi stood before him. Finally, in a cold, empty soundstage, they ran the 5th and final test. No props, no sets, just Morita, Macchio, and the camera. And what unfolded wasn't acting. It was genuine connection. The producers could no longer deny what they were seeing. Still, the final word belonged to Jerry Weintraub. The same man who had fought so hard to keep Morita away from the role now had to make the call. After watching Morita and Macchio in their last screen test, Weintraub picked up the phone. On the other end, Pat waited anxiously at home. Weintraub's voice, usually sharp, sounded different this time. "Pat," he said, "I almost made the worst mistake of my life. Congratulations, you're Miyagi." That single phone call changed everything. But winning the role was only one battle. The next was giving Miyagi his voice. Morita knew that how Miyagi spoke could make or break the character. If the accent leaned too far, it would become a stereotype. If it was too smooth, it wouldn't feel authentic to a Japanese immigrant who learned English later in life. Ironically, the solution came by accident. During one audition, Morita was exhausted. His energy was low and his words slowed into clipped, halting rhythms. That cadence, the pauses, the broken grammar, was the birth of Miyagi's voice. It wasn't comedy. It wasn't parody. It carried dignity, weight, and authenticity. Ralph Macchio later admitted he was stunned at first. He knew Morita as a fast-talking comedian, but suddenly here was someone different, quiet, meditative, profound. The voice made audiences lean in, as if every word carried hidden wisdom. Lines like "wax on, wax off" became iconic not because they were funny, but because they felt true. On set, Morita carried with him moments that he never forgot. One was the drunk Miyagi scene, where his character breaks down in sorrow over losing his wife and child in an internment camp. The studio didn't want the scene included, fearing audiences wouldn't accept seeing the wise mentor so vulnerable. But Morita fought for it. He poured his heart into the performance. When the cameras stopped, the set fell silent. No one spoke. No one clapped. The weight of the moment was undeniable. For Morita, it was proof that he could do more than comedy. He could move people to tears. He also loved smaller, lighter moments, like the scene where Miyagi tries to catch a fly with chopsticks. Written as a simple gag, Morita played it with focus and intensity, making it richer. When Daniel succeeds instead, their laughter felt genuine, showcasing the playful bond between teacher and student. Off camera, that bond was just as real. Morita became a mentor to Ralph Macchio, who was still a teenager dealing with fame and pressure. He offered advice, humor, and support, much like Miyagi did for Daniel. Ralph later described their relationship as the heart of the movie, on screen and off. Even the crew, many of whom doubted Morita at first, came to respect him deeply. By the time the tournament scenes were filmed, they no longer saw him as a comedian trying to play a sensei. They saw him as a sensei, full stop. And that was the truth Pat Morita carried until the very end. Behind the legendary Mr. Miyagi was a man who fought every step of the way just to be seen. His story reminds us that even icons are born from struggle, persistence, and heart. If this journey gave you a new perspective on the Karate Kid, hit that like button. Share this video with friends who grew up on Miyagi's wisdom. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from behind the scenes. Because sometimes the greatest lessons come when the cameras stop rolling. Thanks for watching.